Hey everybody, welcome to KubeCon. This is day 3 that we're doing live broadcasting, live streaming here from the show floor. And we've got another set of great interviews. You know, it's been really interesting kind of picking up on some themes, and I think we're going to see that again with our next guest. So I have the pleasure to be joined by Raj Rasdan, who is co-founder and go-to-market dude at Techstrong, for lack of a better title. Welcome, good to be chatting with you.
Thank you, Mitch. Happy to have you here.
Good to have you. Tell us a little bit about Techstrong for folks that may not have heard it. Tell us about the open source and the company and kind of what you all do.
So Techstrong is about three and a half years old. We are an open source company and built philosophically as an open source platform for adopting and helping people migrate to Kubernetes. Kubernetes is the most talked word in the last 3-4 years I've seen in the entire CI/CD space. And you know, when we started Techstrong with my other 2 co-founders, we thought this is the best way. This is the most challenge that we saw was people are talking about building platforms from their own unique ways. So for example, a platform engineering is seeing the Kubernetes world in a very specific way with him or her being the user. Then developers are, you know, oblivious with what is really happening because they don't want to learn Kubernetes, right? They want something.
Spend all their time.
All the time, right?
Right?
Yeah, they are best checking the code and pushing out to whatever the repo is and doing for staging and QA and everything else. And what we were seeing was that Techstrong was essentially built to help this adoption and migration. Like a whole ton of companies are actually moving to microservices architecture and then thinking that, how do we interface with Kubernetes? So we laid a lot of emphasis on interfaces and interfacing with different platform tools that are already available in the market, both open source and closed source. So we thought, why don't we build an interfacing layer which actually adapts with literally everybody via hooks and APIs and interfaces, and then build a system which actually helps you migrate to Kubernetes. First adopt Kubernetes, and then help you unravel the complexities of Kubernetes in few clicks. So there are, if I go a little more extended in terms of definition, so we could be talking to folks who are just new to Kubernetes and saying that, hey, we can give you ready containerized applications, some templates. With few clicks, you can just go and, first of all, onboard. So that is day 0. So once you are, once you are comfortable with that journey, then, day 2 operations, how do you manage those kind of workflows? Then we give you templates, then give you policies and governance, then we give you all the hooks, which makes the manageability super easy. And I think the best part, which I would like to sort of sum it up in terms of what Techstrong does and bring value is, we cater to both the audiences because the whole dev team consists of various users here. And our philosophy to build this was to make sure everybody focuses on an interface, and this interface is common. So you less worry about the tooling and more look at the interface with a common pane of glass for build, operate, and manage and debug. So I think this is a long answer to exactly what for a while. We were facing the same problems and and when we thought about building Techstrong, we said, let's first solve it for ourselves. And this is a problem that has been going on because we have been using industry-bred, industry-best sort of products like Argo CD and Flux CD and everything else. We said that we don't have to reinvent the wheel there. Let's build an abstraction layer on top of it, take the best practices out of it, build our own unique layer, which is not as opinionated and opinionated to an extent that it suits pretty much everybody's deploy and build style or platform interface style, and then tell folks that, hey, you can come and build all of this through this
for developers by developers kind of thing, which of course helps with adoption, as the target audience. We're in the process when a developer is somewhere in writing code, setting up environments, starting to realize I want to use Kubernetes, let me set it up. Whoa, maybe I don't want to go through all of that myself. We're in the kind of life cycle of creating your maybe first or your next cloud native microservices based application. So they say, you know what, there's this great project called Devtron, right? Devtron V, I should go check that out. What's the best time to kind of introduce it? Or when do people typically introduce it?
So as soon as you build your code and you try and check it in, and that is where you interface with Devtron. So underneath, we can take care of the entire build process, which is the complete CI. We can take care of the CD in totally, and improve the DevOps process. We say this, we can interface with your CI and just use CD. You don't have to rip and replace whatever you are using. Like we can actually pull workloads out of Jenkins or interface with Jenkins jobs, for example. So you can use your existing systems. What we have tried to also put a lot of emphasis here is the friction from what you're currently doing. If you're assuming your microservices already, you're using some sort of containerizations already. Of course, we have templates to get you containerized as well.
Okay.
But let's say if you're already in that journey, then we have put all these interfaces to make sure that we work in, sort of constant communion with what you're using, rather than asking you, hey, just rip and replace and use this. So I think that reduces the friction from, let's say if you're building from a Jenkins and we can adopt you, or you're using a certain other type of, and it is obviously Devtron is GitOps based. So as long as you have something on Git, wherever you are, your repository is, we can pull, and we have direct interfaces from there. So a developer interfaces with Devtron along the CI/CD path all along, and then we say that a lot to also folks that before the production, which is kind of a territory of a DevOps person, pre-production, whether it's staging in QA, and then you do a lot of iterative work, you can literally do all of that in Devtron. And if you choose to, for example, deploy through Helm, for example, there's a Helm package manager as well, which sort of gives you a very visually appealing interface to do a bunch of builds from there. So there is a whole lot of options available to you, because we said that, as in the journey of what is being available as a product, we let you come from various sources. We're not really binding you from how a developer should unravel the area of Kubernetes. The second point that I want to talk about is, and this is a cross-section of about 4,000 open source installations that we have, and about 20, 30 global customers that we have. Folks are, they're trying to wonder, how do we best utilize these templates, etc. Those are all available within the Devtron framework. You can choose one of many of those templates and start using them. And so that, so the adoption journey is very, very easy. And what happens is that many a times, if you don't have a platform like this, there is too much of a tribal knowledge available there. So we want that tribal knowledge to go completely out of the window. So developers want to do, we lay out a golden path for them to sort of do a lot of self-serve without having to know anything of those. So that is the developer promise side of things. Of course, DevOps promise is to move things into production, having a more, robust production setup without breaking things. And of course, if you were to roll back, do we offer all kinds of rollbacks and the diffs and and do we offer enough and more on the debuggability side of things as well. So I think different users have been given various interfaces to see what is the best way they can embrace it. And of course, there is, needless to say, there is a deep amount of SecOps built in as well. So you don't worry about, unsecure builds and all of those kind of things. It interfaces with all the other security systems and scans, etc. as well.
It's interesting because you are catering to, targeting kind of multiple personas, if you will. Developers, sort of abstracting away Kubernetes, the whole build process, DevOps, tool chain, workflow pipeline, and then, of course, deployment and management. Sounds like of Kubernetes once you're in production, correct?
Yeah.
So, could be a developer, could be a platform engineer, SRE ops, whatever person, which has much different requirements, right? How much for the people that deploy it, put it into production, How much do you take away the kind of Kubernetes complexity, details? How much do you abstract it from them? Or is that all still there, you just have a better way to manage it?
So there are, people who are already matured on Kubernetes, so we give them, and I think we sort of add another few layers on top of it to set, what are the, and so there is this Kubernetes maturity, and then there is the non-Kubernetes maturity in a total dev environment. So what we also see is that they have seen, they're very comfortable with the non-Kubernetes maturity as well. What we bring is, since we are very hyper-focused on Kubernetes, we are Kubernetes native as we call ourselves, we try and get you the same amount of maturity on Kubernetes. So let's think, what are the templates? How can you roll back? What are the deployment types? Can you do canary, blue-green, rolling, etc.? And we are also looking at what are the best ways. This entire, disparate systems are the learnings from how you deploy and what are the best ways to deploy in a fairly matured environment. We are working on something called as ephemeral environments or temporary environments, which are basically, if you're not using any sort of clusters during any of your deploys, it brings them down, and which automatically takes care of the costs and everything else. So it containerizes, or it contains it in a certain temporary setup and does not let you take enough memory and compute, etc., etc. So these are best practices built in order to build efficiencies, not from total cost of operations, but how you actually allocate resources. So everybody is talking about FinOps and cost savings.
About cost.
You must have heard that a lot here. So I think we're saying that we don't have a separate vertical per se, but the things that we do alongside the process actually helps very optimally build the systems, including the ones in production as well. So all those bells and whistles that have been built, takes care of a platform engineer's persona of maturing Kubernetes, or these are the best practices from how a matured Kubernetes infrastructure look like, almost at par with your other matured systems in the tech stack. So that is the path for platform engineers and DevOps. Of course, the whole transition from either a legacy network or you're in Kubernetes, from less mature to more mature, that journey is for the developers. So it's equally distributed for both of these folks. But largely, we have tried to rather focus a lot on how do we make this system DevOps persons or SREs or platform engineers' best friend, looking at the problems that they've been facing over years. And it's not the tooling problem, it's also the operational problem of how information flows between this user group and the developer user group. There's always a lot of finger pointing, etc. You did not do this and I did not do that. Why? Because everybody is not on the same plane. That's why I keep emphasizing on building a common interface so that this friction also gets reduced. And as an organization, if you're wearing a CEO's hat and saying that how do we optimally work between these two groups, there is very little that that falls through the cracks, and we are able to sort of at least find an answer. At least DevTron is an attempt to solve that.
How much, so you mentioned you're being GitOps based. How much do you spend on the repository to have everything in that to be able to drive what DevTron does, or do you help people get, maybe they don't have everything, all their config files or scripts or whatever they're using? You would think a lot of that's going to be in there, but it may not necessarily be in a well-organized or structured way because those things tend to evolve over time. How do you help people get to a point where DevTron can take advantage of it and start using that concept?
So our open source is literally everything in the repository that we have, and we actually help folks for all our commercial products. There are some of the, so what we've said, as I said initially, is from an adoption point of view and a migration point of view, everything is given out in open source. Role-based access controls, very fine-grained. Actually, people were a little worried about that. I may not be able to give controls or accesses to sort of junior folks who are very new in the system, how if they may break anything, etc. We're saying that don't worry about it. The access controls are so fine-grained that they're so nuanced that you are actually don't worry about breaking anything else. The system takes care of it. But at least give them then access so that everybody is familiar with what environment they're building and living. So that's one point. So RBACs, SSOs, single sign-ons, everything has been bundled into the open source. So because we don't want any guardrails in terms of adoption of Kubernetes, that's the first promise. And once you're ready and comfortable to move things into production, that is when we come with, slightly other, more nuanced enterprisey features like policy controls and other things. You're saying now you're comfortable, now I can go straight into production. And we have moved people into production in 7 to 8 weeks. That's one sort of metric that I can share. And we have moved people from zero Kubernetes to almost like 30, 50, or 70, 100 microservices literally in 3 to 4 months or about 12 weeks. In my view, from whatever experience that we have from collectively over many, many years, that's a very fast jump into moving your entire workloads into Kubernetes. This wouldn't have been possible without us to actually go into the collective feedback that we get from the open source things, put all of that into Git repository and the open source repo, and also get some of those controls and planes when we actually help people onboard them faster. We have a very vibrant Discord community. Folks sort of interface with us on Slack as well. So I think our idea is that we are leaving no stone unturned in order for people to sort of adopt Kubernetes via Devtron. Our vision would be, and all of us think about that, when people think about migrating or adopting Kubernetes, the first name that should come is Devtron. And that's the way we want to build.
Great. Well, congratulations on your success so far and your growth in the U.S. North America market and enterprises. What's the best place for folks to check this out? Go check out your GitHub repository.
GitHub repository, Devtron.website, Devtron.ai website. We have folks all over US. Our US headquarters is based out of Silicon Valley. So hopefully we are available literally. I mean, come check us out, and I'm sure you'll like it.
Great. Join the Slack channel, do the things to interact.
There's Discord, and they can join it.
There's a lot of great help and support.
Absolutely.
Communications happening there.
Absolutely.
So, well, good. Look forward to more great progress, and your timing is great because adoption and management of Kubernetes is a massive theme right now for where we are in the adoption cycle. So, Raj, who is co-founder and go-to-market with Devtron, Devtron.ai, right?
Yes.
Okay, good. Make sure I got
Thank
that.
you very much, Mitch.
Yeah,
thanks for having me.
thanks for joining us.
Thank you.
Come back and talk to us again.
Absolutely. Look forward. Thank you very much.
We'll be right back with more great interviews. So hang tight. We'll be right back. Hey everybody, welcome back to KubeCon 2023 North America here in Chicago. So we were talking Kubernetes. There's some other topics too, but that's certainly a theme for today. So I'm joined by Sean O'Meara. Welcome, Sean, from
Thanks
Mirantis.
for having me.
Field CTO, correct?
Field CTO, that's right. Yeah.
Great. Say a little bit about Mirantis, if folks may not know of you all, kind of things that you do, and we'll talk about some of your announcements.
Cool. Mirantis has been around for a better part of 12, 13 years now, very focused in the open source space. Specifically, we started off in the infrastructure space with the OpenStack community, moved to Kubernetes fairly early, collaborated with Google in the early days on Kubernetes, and we've really just focused on enterprise customers. In 2019, we bought the Docker Enterprise business, which we've merged into our product line, Mirantis Kubernetes Engine product line. We're running hundreds of customers on Kubernetes today and have done so at scale for a number of years. So our entire business is around how to make Kubernetes easier and more consumable.
A lot of depth. Techstrong Research, which I run, and we've done some work with you all on that, some great, interesting research. So what's new, kind of what's happening now? You all continue to move fast and kind of do big things when you tend to announce things. Yeah,
we like to make a splash when we can. We really needed to double down on our open source and our open source chops and everything we've been doing in that space. So around the 2021 timeframe, we launched our K0s offering, which for us was the next generation of the Kubernetes offering, really focusing on how do we make Kubernetes super easy to use. To deploy, but the challenge with K0s, as easy as it is, it's still one cluster. The majority of our customer base today, though, run one or two large clusters, and that is a management nightmare for them, because you've got to learn Kubernetes, you've got to manage that. So, just before the show, we've just announced Cosmotron. Cosmotron is a new way of deploying and managing Kubernetes clusters. So we're really trying to change the paradigm of how people think of a Kubernetes cluster. Cluster can be a throwaway. It doesn't need to be a pet. It can be cattle, to use the old paradigm here. Really what we're trying to solve for with Cosmotron is this idea that you can have a small cluster very affordably. So that's the key message. Ultimately what we're doing with Cosmotron is we're solving the problem of the resource overhead when I need to build clusters. I want smaller clusters, but I don't want to deal with the control plane overhead. The 3 to 5 nodes and then 100 nodes behind that cluster, which I then got to manage and deal with all the complexity of. If I can put Cosmotron onto my systems and I can virtualize the control planes, so run them as a Kubernetes workload, and then attach workers from anywhere. So that's the key message here. What we've done is I can spin up a new Kubernetes cluster in about 7 seconds, 3 lines of YAML, and there I go, I have a cluster up and running. And then the other part of what we've done is we've integrated that to CAPI, so the Cluster API service, made Cosmotron a bootstrap provider for CAPI, so I can now attach workers from anywhere.
Yeah, so plus if you have existing infrastructure, you tie it into that as well, right? That's going to be my first question. So like new greenfield, or can you bring it to, so you talked about people having generally one large or a couple large clusters, and of course, yeah, those things probably should be other things, but who has the time to really kind of manage it, split it up? In that kind of a scenario, is it still, attach Cosmotron to the workers and you can start managing that? Or is there sort of a dividing line of where very oriented towards this kind of a size of an implementation versus something that's bigger?
So ultimately what we're doing with Cosmotron is we're just moving the control plane from being a pet. So by virtualizing the control plane, I can now spin up hundreds of control planes. So instead of having to share a cluster or share workloads on a single cluster, I can spin up a cluster per workload because I don't have that overhead. The way Cosmotron works, we use the connectivity with a K service. So now we have full separation between those workers and that control plane. So now my workers can live anywhere. So I can put the workers, I can run a Cosmotron control plane on-prem. I own my control plane. I don't have to use a third-party control plane. Use one of the cloud provider control planes, which take 25 minutes to spin up. But I can attach workers from any of those cloud providers, or all of those cloud providers, as long as I have a connectivity back to that single control plane. suddenly I'm changing the way. If I want to do testing work, I spin up a cluster, a whole cluster for that test, run the test, and kill it. So that's the beauty of what's behind Cosmotron.
It seems like almost you've abstracted or kind of virtualized away the structural component of Kubernetes and said, that's still there, right? You need those things for load performance and lots of good reasons. But I can also now kind of treat it as anywhere. Matter of fact, it seems like those one or two big cluster implementations you could start spinning up clusters wherever you want, right? New cloud provider on-prem, maybe same cloud provider, but
true multi-cloud.
True multi-cloud, yeah.
Because instead of trying to force my developers to use a bunch of different endpoints and complicate the application deployment, I'm now doing that, and I can put multiple kubelets in different cloud locations or at the edge, attached to that centralized control plane, and I'm deploying to one single kube API. Trying to just simplify, again, with our whole processes, simplify the developer experience of getting actual workload into production, which is what every company ultimately wants.
Seems also like it would help kind of the development process too, right? Early development environment, testing environments, simulating production.
Yeah. CI/CD processes, being able to spin up clusters on demand, being able to move your production workload really simply. If your application is fully automated, why shouldn't your infrastructure be fully automated?
Good point. So talk some more about the control plane, and you said you containerized it. How does that differentiate from the way it's implemented now? Is that one of the limitations of expanding and growing and managing across a complex infrastructure?
So it all really boils down to the kube API and etcd. Typically, when I'm deploying a control plane, I need to deploy etcd and I need to deploy the kube API, and they're distinct components of the system. So if I'm using something like kubeadm to deploy a control plane, I've got to spin up 3 separate nodes, at least for production. I mean, yes, you can do a single node cluster, but it's not really a cluster. What I'm doing is I'm putting etcd and the kube API into a single pod, and I'm treating those as just another Kubernetes containerized workload, which means I control them using Kubernetes norms and Kubernetes standards for containers. So kube API etcd lives inside the pod. I can make as many replicas of that pod or not as I want. Just change a replica count in Kubernetes. Standard CRD norms for Kubernetes. Beauty is now I need to expand that control plane to support more workers. I push a button, 2 seconds later I have another pod running or another version running, another container running, so I'm expanding. The kubelet itself runs anywhere, and then the connectivity service provides for that connectivity.
Right, you mentioned emphasizing open source, kind of really, I guess, kind of leaning into that even more, right? Tell me about some things you've done. Is that particularly around Cosmotron, or is it in general, or what's the philosophy?
It's really much in general. The Lens team where this work has come out of, the Lens group, we really wanted to focus on open source as much as possible. We leverage the open source community for everything we do at Mirantis. We've been huge contributors to the community over the years. We want to continue to be good citizens of the open source community. So both K0s is fully open source, and we've got a huge following of K0s, a lot of people providing input and feedback. We just move faster in the open source space. We can do things with much better quality because we get that feedback in a very controlled, and so both K0s and Cosmotron are fully open source. We obviously offer commercial support options for them, but we're seeing a lot of customers are diving in there, trying it out, implementing it, and then coming to talk to us later on about getting support for it, just to get that backup.
So it takes you out of the game of kind of the crippleware, right? It sort of works, but if you need more than 5, you got to come to us, right?
So, ultimately, the open source model is always challenging for any company. We want to put it out there, but we also need to pay for it to be produced. So by being good citizens, people can consume our software. When they go into production, they need that extra layer of support, or quite frankly, they don't have the people to do that support themselves.
I was thinking that too.
And that's who really we're talking to. We're talking to a lot of platform teams who want to focus their efforts on building the tools their developers need to be more efficient. Well, we're providing the tools the platform teams need to be more efficient. And if they can treat Kubernetes as just another workload, same way they treat those workloads, we are simplifying their lives and giving them back time to focus on building value for their business. That's
kind
the
of
ethos.
built into the nature of the job, but organizations aren't hiring 50, 100, 200 platform engineers. They've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 8 maybe, not large teams. So they're kind of incented to do their own productivity improvement by open source automation, management, control plane kind of
Absolutely. I mean, I've been going around the world talking to a lot of their customers. I was in the Nordics recently with a platform team at a bank. And they're super excited by what this brings them because they're spending so much of their time dealing with underlying platform issues at what is the commodity layer. The Kubernetes API is really a commodity layer. It's what we put on top of it that brings value to the business. And I can get Kubernetes now from half a dozen to a dozen different places.
Yeah, absolutely.
On demand or deploy it myself. But it's still complicated and it shouldn't be. And that's what we're trying to move with the community to be into that place.
Is some of that complexity also introduced by these distributions or these cloud providers, or especially you talk about multi-cloud? Because now you're talking about everything's not uniform, the same. I've got to manage across that variation.
I mean, of course it is. Ultimately, a business model says you want to try and keep your customers as close to home as possible. And I won't point fingers here at anybody, but the lock-in model is a true thing. Especially in our European customers, we're seeing more and more desire to use multiple providers. And I'm being very careful to say providers because that could be cloud or on-premise.
Right.
It could be, often we're seeing 2 vendor policies coming in, at least 2 vendor policies. So they'll work with us and another vendor, or 2 other vendors providing their Kubernetes resources. The reality of that is, it's not just the Kubernetes that's different, and often it's not. At least at the surface, the API is the same. It's everything that they wrap around that is different and adds layers of complexity for platform teams, as well as I mentioned earlier, the multiple endpoint problem. I'm deploying my app now. Which endpoints do I choose to do? And suddenly what ends up happening is the apps just go into one provider because it's easier. So we're seeing that the time saving and the simplicity that we can offer is really good for these platform teams.
Great. If you don't mind, I'd love to ask about K0. Is that primarily being used, kind of spin up the simplified development environment, or do you see it being used at the edge a lot? Because people talk about K3, K0, kind of edge environments.
Yeah, so we've got a wide range of K0's customers today and a wide range of use cases. Currently, I think we've got about 200,000 clusters that are reporting telemetry. But we see that we've got use cases right now with people building clusters on-prem. So traditional, expand out clusters. We're seeing clusters that are being built in the public cloud, so on top of public cloud providers, on top of VM instances. We're seeing it being used as appliances. In fact, we have one customer who is embedding K0s as a single node, single cluster, in inverted commas, appliance. And they push K0s out with the K0s manifest capabilities, and they run it as an appliance. We're seeing K0s being used at the edge. Because the kubelet is so simple to deploy, we just pop it out, provide a token file, and it can run, I hate to say it, on something like a Raspberry Pi or an equivalent commercial version of a Raspberry Pi. So it really makes it's been designed to be simple to use in a multitude of different use cases, and Edge is definitely one of those.
It seems kind of architecturally that really supports the idea of cars are becoming software platforms with wheels on it, right?
For sure.
But everything is, like your smartphone could be some part of that distributed edge network for you, or
it already is in some ways.
Right? And that seems like a great place where K0 could be.
Absolutely.
I mean, it really could permeate a lot of environments.
Well, the beauty of that is, where we're looking at it from the point of view of K0s being the simple to deploy and manage Kubernetes, Cosmotron removing the complexity of the control plane, CAPI providing that infrastructure management layer, and we've done some extra work to do bare metal management and operating system management as part of one of our other products. All of those things combined, I now have a very simple way to do a very, very distributed Kubernetes network. And because I have all this information in a central database, so from an application point of view, I can query that database and understand what my network looks like. And that's the beauty behind it.
Great.
CAPI, Cosmotron, and K0s, all of that together. And that's the vision.
So you launched Cosmotron here. Have you been having open source users of that for a while now. I assume it's been out there and kind of tested and battle tested.
So we've been doing demos here all week. We have a number of people trying it out. We're seeing, like K0's, we've got a lot of commercial use. Cosmotron is new. We've got a lot of test clusters out there, a lot of CAPI integration work happening. I've been doing demos here all week, showing people, 3 lines of YAML, 7 seconds, and there's a cluster up and running. I can do a full CAPI deployment on a public cloud provider in under a minute and a half, and most of that time is waiting for the instances to start. So it's pretty stable. We're seeing a lot of good uptake. We really want the community to come out and dig into it and provide us feedback. We're always trying to improve.
That's the open source model. Where can folks find out more? Kick the tires, download the open source, do all the good things you can do.
Everything's on GitHub. Cosmotron.io, K0s.io. Of course, Mirantis.com. There are links to all of this. We're doing everything in the open. The team is super active online, so dig in on GitHub, ask questions, load issues. The guys are always there to respond. The leadership of the K0's team has been helping me get ready for this, preparing videos and demos at 2 o'clock in the morning their time, and they're all in Finland, so it's been a great experience to work with them.
Remarkably vivid for being up that long, doing those long hours of work. So
great team.
Glad you're doing well. Well, congrats on the launch and
you.
the hard work on Cosmotron and K0 and other great things Mirantis is doing. So keep us informed. Let us know how it's going, and we're really interested to see where this evolves and use cases that might catch. Always the fun part.
Like we
never intended that to happen, but it's a great use case, right?
We intend to publish those use cases as soon as they're ready. We love talking about what we do. We put a lot of our use cases on the websites as well, so we're doing some amazing stuff with customers around the world.
Good. All right, Sean O'Meara here from Mirantis. Be sure and check it out on GitHub and their website. We'll be back with another great interview here from KubeCon North America in Chicago on our 3rd day of live streaming about Kubernetes and a lot of other great things. So thank you, Sean, for
Thank you very much.
us. We'll be back in just a minute.
Good stuff.
Great job,
Thank you very
man.
much.
Good talking with you.
Well, thanks for letting me gush.
Oh, no problem. Hey,
It's nice to have something to be really excited
it's
about.
been fun to finally be able to talk about it. I mean, that's always so great.
And also to put the great work that the team's doing out there.
All right. Yeah, I'll do the next one. Thanks, Sean. Look forward to seeing you again. Take care, man. You can have a piece of the gum.